Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to our Ramadan reflections for 2025. The series title, as you'll recall, is The Soul's Path Home, Divine Wisdom on Death and Beyond, where we continue to reflect on the stages of human existence from the perspective of the Quran and the teachings of the Immaculate Ahlul Bayt. May God's peace and blessings be upon all of them. Now, there's a moment in every soul's journey when the body that it existed in for a period of time on earth is laid to rest, and the living that have consigned that body to the earth take their leave. The grave, which seems silent and lonely to those left behind, marks the beginning of an entirely new chapter for the soul. The Quran speaks of this transition in Surah Al-Mu'minun, chapter 23, verse 100. Allah says, "And behind them is a barrier until the day they are resurrected." Now, the grave is not merely a resting place for the body. It's the gateway to Barzakh, the realm between this world and the day of resurrection. This word Barzakh, it originally means something that intervenes between two things and prevents them from reaching each other. And this is what we see how it is used in the Quran as well. But when we look at Islamic terminology in general, the realm that lies between this world and the hereafter is, as we said, is called the Barzakh. The realm of Barzakh is also referred to as the realm of spirits, the realm of the grave, and also the imaginal world. Now, for the soul, it's a realm of waiting, where the experiences of comfort or distress begin depending on one's deeds in life. We make our own comfort or distress, brothers and sisters. Now, some of the hadith that we have explain that Barzakh is a phase where the soul becomes more aware of the reality of its actions. It's where the soul faces the consequences of its deeds, even before the coming of the Day of Judgment. How else do we understand the world of Barzakh, or how do our scholars also give us explanation of it? Well, some of our scholars refer to Barzakh as the facsimile world, because it's just like this world. It's almost a carbon copy, but it is so in shape and form, yet different and distinct from the viewpoint of its substance and its specialities. After our death, we enter a realm which is in comparison like the world vis-a-vis the womb of our mother. Similarly, our bodies also will be a facsimile body in the Barzakh. That is to say that they will appear quite like our worldly material body, but factually, there will not be this body containing the skin and bones and flesh and organs that you and I have today. This Barzakh body does not have barriers that limit it, which our bodies, obviously, as we know, face in this material, physical world. For example, if you happen to see a deceased family member or a friend of yours in a dream, you only see their worldly material body, whereas their real body is in the grave. Or maybe they're at home asleep, and all you're seeing is their facsimile form. That's what we refer to, that's what is mentioned by the scholars when they say that you would have a barzakhi body, a facsimile body. So we're now at a crossroads in our discussion. We've just buried our loved one. We've covered the grave with dirt. We've recited that final talqeen. The family, as is customary in our culture, sit at the grave as the friends and community members go back to the center, or go back to work, or go back to school, or back to their normal lives. The families sit and read Quran, recite supplications, they cry, they remember their dearly departed loved one, they recall the fond memories, they'll hug one another, they'll place some flowers on the grave for their own comfort. And then they're going to also leave to either go back to the center for a meal with the community, again, as some of our cultures traditionally do, or they'll go home to grieve and lament in private. Meanwhile, as they go to their comfortable and familiar home, the loved one that they've buried is in their home, their new, strange, enclosed home. In life, they may have had a beautiful mansion with multiple bedrooms. However, now they're relegated to a one-bedroom grave. There are no lights, no windows to look out, nothing. The first night in the grave, brothers and sisters, is often described as one of the most significant moments of the soul's journey. It's a moment of profound solitude, and yet it is the first step in many steps towards going back to Allah. For a believer, that first night in the grave is described as a time of comfort and peace. The grave may appear dark, but the light of faith and good deeds illuminates it. The light of their good action provides them comfort and solace. The light of their belief and adherence to the mastership of Imam Ali, peace be upon him, and his immaculate progeny, peace be upon all of them, illuminate the grave from end to end. However, still it's a place of loneliness, seclusion, and perhaps confusion. Can you and I, we the living, do anything to help our loved ones in this time? Well, the hadith tell us that just as we used to give gifts to our loved ones while alive, which made them happy, we can continue to do so after death. For example, we have the beautiful hadith reported to be from our sixth Imam, Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq, may God's peace and blessings be upon both of them, in which he reminds us, indeed the deceased become happy through the mercy showered upon him or her, and the seeking of forgiveness for them, just as the living become happy when a gift is given to them. On the advice of our beloved Prophet Muhammad, may Allah bless him and his immaculate family, one of the best things that we can do to alleviate the fears of the first night in the grave is contained in a very profound hadith that he's told us. Now let me preface this by saying that what we can see from our esteemed scholars, that is the Maraja Taqlid, is that they will refer to this powerful prayer with a few different names. So you'll see it referred to as Salat of Laylatul Dafan, prayer for the first night of burial, or Salat Hadiyal Mayyit, prayer for the gift to the deceased, or lastly you'll see it referred to as Salatul Wahshah, or Salat Laylatul Wahshah, the prayer of the night of loneliness or fear. Before I go into the details, I want to reflect on the following hadith that is narrated to us from Hudhayfa ibn al-Yamani, the very, very famous Sahabi, companion of our beloved Prophet Muhammad. May Allah bless him and his family. And it's reported that Hudhayfa, quoting the Prophet, has been quoted as saying that there's no time more difficult for the deceased than the first night, meaning the first night in the grave. So have mercy on your dead by giving charity. If you cannot, then let one of you pray 2-rakat, reciting in this 2-rakat salat Surah Al-Fatiha once and Ayatul Kursi once, and Surah Ikhlas twice in the first rakat. And in the second rakat, Surah Al-Fatiha once and Surah At-Takathur 10 times. After completing this prayer, the Prophet has been quoted as saying, you should say, O Allah, send blessings upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, and send the reward of this prayer to the grave of that deceased person, so-and-so, the son or the daughter of so-and-so. The hadith goes on to say from the Prophet, Allah will then immediately send 1,000 angels to that person's grave, each angel carrying a garment and an ornament. The grave will be expanded from its constriction until the day when the trumpet is blown. The one who prayed will be given good deeds equal to the number of things that the sun has risen upon, and they will be raised 40 levels. Now, let me say this, as we end that hadith, let me say that before I move on to the method given in this hadith, which may seem different or contradictory to what we're commonly used to, let me quote some important rulings from His Eminence Ayatollah Sistani, may Allah preserve and protect him and all of our scholars, and what his rulings are on the topic of this prayer to be done on the first night of the burial. In ruling number 2066, he notes that it's recommended to perform the 2-rakat of Salat Laylatul Dafan, that is a prayer on the night of the burial, for the deceased on the first night of the grave in the following method. So the first method on the first night of burial is in the first rakat after Surah Al-Fatiha, you recite Ayatul Kursi, chapter 2, verses 255 up to 257 one time. And then in the second rakat after Surah Al-Fatiha, recite Surah Al-Qadr 10 times. And then after the prayer, you would say, "O Allah, send the blessings upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, and send its reward," meaning of the salat, "to the grave of," and name the person with their name. Now Sayyid Sistani mentions another method for this prayer, in which in the first rakat after Surah Al-Fatiha, recite Surah Al-Ikhlas twice, and in the second rakat after Al-Fatiha, recite Surah Al-Takathur 10 times. And then after that, you say the same supplication as we previously mentioned. So in fact, multiple methods are in fact permissible. But Sayyid Sistani goes on to mention in the next ruling, 2067, he says if the deceased is to be transported to a distant city, or the burial is delayed for any reason, then the first method of Salatul Wahshah should be delayed until the first night of burial. However, the second method, he says it appears that its recommendation is specific to the first night after death. So when should the believers perform this prayer? Well, in ruling 2068, he says that the prayer of the night of burial can be performed at any time during the night, but it's better to perform it at the beginning of the night after the Isha prayers. Well, what if I make a mistake? I'm praying it and I make a mistake in the prayer. Does it count? Does the deceased get the reward? Do they get the comfort? Do they get the peace? Again, Sayyid Sistani says in ruling 2069, if one performs this prayer but forgets to recite Ayatul Kursi or Surah Al-Qadr, or recites less than the specified amount, and the time for rectification has passed, meaning you can't, the night has passed, he says that prayer does not suffice as a prayer on the night of burial. So we have to be careful, brothers and sisters. Now let me mention a few more points before I conclude. If you paid attention, and I hope you did, to the wording of the statement attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah bless him and his family, he noted the first option was to give charity in the name of the departed. And then if we had nothing, to perform the 2-rakat salat. Ideally, we can and we should try and do both if possible. Give charity in the name of the dearly departed and perform this brief 2-rakat prayer, which might only take 3 minutes, 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes at most. What an easy thing for us to do. However, what a significant act it is for the deceased to get the benefit of. To conclude, let me say this, that the first night in the grave may seem daunting, but for those who had lived a life of sincerity, faith, and righteousness, it's merely the beginning of a journey toward eternal peace. And for us who are still alive in the world, it's a reminder to prepare for that inevitable moment when we too will be placed in our graves. May Allah grant us the strength to live a life of righteousness so that our final journey is one of peace and comfort. Join us tomorrow on Ramadan Reflections for 2025 as we review the theme of The Reward Begins, the grave as a garden. Until then, as usual, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.